Hello and welcome to Idaho by the Numbers, Demographics for Vocational Rehabilitation. I am Jeffrey Meyer, Instruction Librarian at Iowa Wesleyan University. The Technical Assistance Center for Quality Employment will increase the number and quality of employment outcomes for individuals with disabilities through training and technical assistance to state VR agency personnel. The VR Tech QE will support state VR agency personnel to implement innovative and effective employment strategies and supporting practices. The Technical Assistance Center for Quality Employment incorporates work from these partners shown here. The content of this presentation was developed under a grant, the Vocational Rehabilitation Technical Assistance Center for Quality Employment, H264K2-00003 from the U.S. Department of Education. However, those contents do not necessarily represent the policy of the U.S. Department of Education, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government. This presentation consists of the following learning objectives. We will examine Idaho's population figures not only at the state level, but also at the county level to localize unemployment, poverty, and other figures in detail. Some of these questions include: where are the population concentrations in Idaho? Which counties have a high number of Hispanic, Latino, or Mexican-born residents? Which counties have a higher proportion of Native Americans? Are there counties with higher proportions of veterans? We'll identify the counties with the greatest economic disadvantages. We also identify counties with high representation of Native American and Hispanic or Latino communities. We'll also examine Idaho's disability figures. Some of these questions will include: where in the state are unemployment figures higher than in other areas? How does income differ across the state? Which counties have a higher poverty rate than other counties? Let's begin with Idaho at the state level to get a general overview of big numbers. Idaho has approximately 1.8 million residents. The median household income is $61,000, which is very similar to the median national household income of $65,712. Southeastern Idaho, along the Utah and Wyoming boundaries, with the exception of Madison County, has several counties with median household income above $50,000. The 5 counties in Idaho with the highest median household incomes are Valley, Ada, Jefferson, Bonneville, and Teton. 4 counties in the lowest median household income bracket are Shoshone, Lemhi, Camas, and Madison. The per capita income in Idaho highlights a different pattern. Per capita income figures are going to weight income by person as opposed to household. What this means is that a modest income in a household with multiple children will have a relatively low per capita income, because that wealth is then divided by each person. However, in a big city where you have many people living alone in apartments, the per capita income may go up. The counties with the highest per capita income are Valley, Boise County, Ada, Camas, Blaine, Butte, and Teton. It's almost like there's a band that runs east to west from Ada County through central Idaho to Teton, where there is a higher per capita income. And there are important demographic distinctions to consider. Camas County, for instance, goes from a low household income to a pretty high per capita income. How can this happen? There are multiple factors that might play into this, but Camas County has a somewhat higher proportion of older people in it as opposed to the surrounding counties. So it may be that you have more people living alone in Camas County. But this is likely just one factor that can result in per capita income differing pretty significantly from household income. In general, Idaho's counties have an older population in the counties that border Montana. Shoshone, Clearwater, Idaho County, and Lemhi, all bordering Montana, have over 19% of their populations over the age of 65. So at least 1 in 5 people in those counties are senior citizens. That's a very high number. Almost 1 in 10, 9%, of Idaho residents are veterans. This is higher than the 6.9% across the nation. The counties with the highest percentage of veterans are Custer, Elmore, Adams, and Clearwater. Veteran status is a thing to consider for employment services, as state and federal opportunities often have a veteran's preference requirement. Idaho has a lot of federal land, and federal land brings federal jobs. The most heavily populous county in Idaho is Ada County with 482,000 residents, followed by Canyon County at 230,000 residents. These two counties combined have 712,000 residents, which means that about 40% of the state lives in Ada and Canyon counties. Now, that also means that 60% of Idahoans do not live in Ada or Canyon County, and this is where it gets tricky. It's much easier to have an office in the big city and operate in the big city. The trick is reaching the 60% who do not live in the Boise area. Kootenai has 166,000 residents, and Bonneville has 119,000 residents. Ada, Canyon, Kootenai, and Bonneville counties represent almost 1 million residents, or 55% of the state's population. So almost half of Idaho does not live in the most populous counties. So here's where you see the strain with regional offices outside of Boise. There's a lot of territory and a lot of population outside of the most populous counties. Idaho is a growing state. While large regions of the country from the Midwest to the Appalachians are bleeding population, the Rockies to the Pacific are growing. Idaho is a part of that western growth trend. Only a few counties in Idaho are losing more than 2% population between 2010 and 2019. Clark County is losing the most. Clark has lost almost 14% of its population since 2010. Butte County has lost about 1% each year since 2010, so 11% loss between 2010 and 2019. Power County has lost 2.43% population since 2010. On the other side of the ledger, several Idaho counties have really exploded since 2010. Ada County has grown 22% since 2010, Canyon County 21%, Teton 20%, Kootenai County has grown 19%, and Valley County has grown 16%. These are pretty remarkable growth rates in the state of Idaho. There are also a lot of transplants moving to Idaho to find work. International migration to Idaho shows growth in south central Idaho, where Elmore, Blaine, Lincoln, and Jerome counties have a 3 or 4% international immigration increase between 2010 and 2019. This isn't very surprising. Southern Idaho's counties have a heavy agricultural component, and the Twin Falls areas is a nexus between the vegetable and potato southeast Idaho regions and the ranching south central region. It makes sense that you would have the largest international immigration to those locations. A huge portion of America's agricultural labor is performed by people from Mexico and Central America. We will see those figures in detail later on. Boise, the largest city in Idaho, has a population just over 250,000 residents. So about 13% of Idaho's population lives in the city of Boise, or about 1 in 6 Idahoans. Now, another 100,200 people live in Nampa, which added with Boise makes about 336,000 residents between those two cities. 90,000 live in Twin Falls, 56,000 live in Pocatello, and 65,000 live in Idaho Falls. This means some 550,000 people live in just those metro areas connected on Highway 84, 86, 15 on that circuit that cuts a semicircle between the mountains. Another way to think about it is that about 1 in 3 Idahoans live in these 5 metro areas on this highway circuit. On the other hand, this is a significant percentage of the population. But I'm sure you are well aware the hard part is connecting to the 2/3 of people who are not living on this metro highway system. However, it is good to know that this quarter puts you in reach of about 1/3 of the state population. So just with this one highway system, 84, 86, 15, you are in direct contact with about 1/3 of the state. About 1 in 10 Idahoans live in poverty, which is below the national figure of 12.3%. Breaking down these figures by age bracket shows distinctions. The poorest group are the youngest. Almost 1 in 6 Idahoans under the age of 18 are poor. The number improves slightly to about 1 in 10 among the working age bracket between 18 and 64. The least poor are the oldest, with 7% over the age of 65 living in poverty. Idaho is more educated than the nation as a whole. 2/3 have some post-secondary education experience, compared to 61.7% of the nation as a whole. Almost 1 in 3 Idahoans have a bachelor's degree or more. That figure is precisely at 29%. About another 1 in 3, 36.6%, have some college or an associate's degree. 2/3 of Idaho employees work in the private sector. 1 in 6, 14.3%, are government employees, and 12.7% are either self-employed or assist a self-employed family member. Education and healthcare, the so-called eds and meds, represent the largest industry in the state, with 1 in 5 Idahoans working in education or healthcare. This is an interesting figure because almost twice as many Idahoans work in a school, clinic, or hospital than in retail. It's possible that the recent pandemic might only widen this industry gap, with more people now in the habit of using electronic shopping as opposed to traditional brick-and-mortar stores. The number of Idahoans in healthcare and education is also double that of the number of people working in restaurants and recreation outlets. So in other terms, there are about as many Idahoans working in schools, clinics, and hospitals as there are people working in restaurants, hotels, and retail outlets. This is a highly developed economy, and traditional employment opportunities may be shifting. About 1 in 10 Idahoans work in manufacturing, which is again about half the percent that work in education and healthcare. Let's try to break down these economics more specifically by county, because each county has a different economy. The USDA's Atlas of Rural and Small Town America identifies counties that are what they describe as farming dependent. According to data from the Atlas of Rural and Small Town America, southern Idaho tends to be more farm dependent. A county is identified as farm dependent if the county's annual agriculture output represents 25% or more of the county's economy, or if 15% of the jobs in the county are agricultural. Owyhee, Gooding, Lincoln, Jerome, Minidoka, Cassia, Power, and Oneida are examples of farm-dependent counties in southern Idaho. It's important to note that a number of these southern farm-dependent counties are also classified as low education counties. Low education counties are counties where 25% or more of the residents above the age of 25 do not have a high school diploma or GED. This is a stark demographic, and it should be known that education in these counties is a significant factor. The low education counties are Owyhee, Gooding, Lincoln, Jerome, Minidoka, and Cassia, and those are in the south there. Clark County along the Montana border is also classified as low education. Now, this is where education level and farm work in rural America can sometimes present counterintuitive data. We have talked about how southern Idaho has farm-dependent counties with lower education levels than other Idaho counties. However, southern Idaho, especially southeastern and eastern Idaho, have very low unemployment rates. North Idaho has much higher unemployment rates. So it's not that people in rural southern Idaho have farm-dependent economies and they're jobless. In fact, southern and southeastern Idaho counties are actually have quite low unemployment rates. And poverty rates in southern Idaho really aren't any different in those counties as compared to counties elsewhere in the state. It's important to realize that an agricultural economy can't just be written off as poor. Those economies might actually be quite robust. Agriculture was the dominant labor force for time immemorial. 1920 was the first time that the United States Census showed more people living in cities than in a rural environment. However, there are a number of counties in Idaho where agriculture remains a dominant lifestyle. The Rural and Small Town America Atlas identifies these southern Idaho counties as farming dependent. Again, Owyhee, Jerome, Gooding, Lincoln, Minidoka, Cassia, Power, Oneida, and Franklin. On the border with Montana, Clark County is also classified as farming dependent, as is Jefferson County. Only one northern county, Lewis, is identified as farming dependent. The USDA reports heavy potato and vegetable production in southern Idaho, which rings along from about St. Anthony through Idaho Falls along the 86-84 to Twin Falls, and then agricultural production lightens a little bit as the highway turns northwest toward Boise and Nampa. We will see that the Potato Southeast lowlands is a stable median income zone with low unemployment rates. There is, again, the perception that agricultural zones are inherently poorer than metropolitan zones, but this is not always the case, and these counties in South and Southeast Idaho are very good examples of this. Agriculture can provide a very stable economy because people always need to buy food. So sometimes agricultural economies are buffered from the highs and lows that you see in other industries. For example, during the 2008-2009 meltdown of the stock market and the big urban economies, a lot of the economies in the central United States that are agricultural were in some ways buffered from the fallout of the 2008-2009 meltdown. The issue in poverty cannot lie with the residents who live in these agricultural counties as a whole, but rather with the smaller portion of the population, oftentimes out of view, that do the actual field work, many of whom are international workers. The USDA reports robust cattle ranching in south central Idaho in the Twin Falls region. So you sort of have the potato and vegetable area of eastern, southeast Idaho sort of merges into ranching territory in south central Idaho and the Twin Falls area. Just a few notes about rural counties that might be helpful for VR outreach. One feature of rural life is that folks in rural counties often don't want to leave the county or the area that they grew up in. This is very different lifestyle than in, say, Boise, where there are many new arrivals to Boise who may have moved from far away to take a job in the up-and-coming big city economy. Many eastern cities are losing population, but Boise is an example of strong growth. Rural statistics can be difficult to pinpoint. The U.S. Census defines counties as either metropolitan or non-metropolitan. A metropolitan county is a county that contains a city with at least 50,000 people. If a county does not have a single city with at least 50,000 people, it is classified as non-metropolitan. Most counties nationally are non-metropolitan, so Idaho is actually quite similar to the rest of the country in that way. Think of the big states with big urban areas with big state populations, like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Texas. These states, in turn, have very large regions that are non-metropolitan. There's a lot of rural in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of rural in Michigan. There's a lot of rural in Texas. So just, Idaho is kind of like that. There's a few big population centers, and then there's a lot of rural. But counties are large areas, and counties can be classified by the census as metropolitan even if the county has a significant rural economy and population. For instance, Owyhee County is a farming-dependent county, but it is also a metropolitan county. It has an urbanized area exceeding 50,000 people, while at the same time, there is plenty of space in the county for agriculture to add up to a significant portion of the economy. The important thing to remember with these farming-dependent counties is that folks may not be as eager to move as I've mentioned, and they may prefer to stay in a small town. A farming economy will present different kinds of jobs in an urban environment, and those are always things to keep mindful of. Only one county in Idaho is classified as manufacturing dependent. A county is designated as manufacturing dependent if 23% or more of the county's earnings are derived from manufacturing, or if more than 16% of the workers in the county are employed in manufacturing. Caribou County is the one county in Idaho that is classified as manufacturing. Mining, the original driver of these Rocky Mountain states, is still dominant in a few counties in Idaho. A county is considered mining dependent if earnings in that county are 13% or more of the county's earnings, or if 8% of the jobs are in this category. Shoshone in the north and Custer in central Idaho are the two counties identified as mining dependent. In addition, southeastern Idaho also has significant numbers of people working in mining. Caribou, Bear Lake, and Oneida have large numbers of workers in mining, as does Lemhi along the Montana border. The federal and state government account for a large portion of employment in central Idaho. The Atlas of Rural and Small-Town America classifies a county as government job sector dependent if 14% or more of the county labor force earnings are in state or federal government. Lemhi, Boise County, Idaho County, Clearwater, and Latah County are examples of central north counties that have a robust federal and state sector. Idaho is among a group of states that has a natural beauty that results in certain counties having a strong recreational economy. So you have a beautiful state that people want to visit. That's a really great thing. Pretty mountains and good fishing have economic rewards. Counties are classified as recreation counties if entertainment, recreation, accommodations, restaurants, and other hospitality services are a significant portion of the county's income. These counties have also a high number of vacation and seasonal housings. So there's a few ways that a county can be designated as a recreation county, in addition to the the regular services and businesses that you would see associated with vacationing, the accommodations, the housing, the restaurants. A certain portion of the homes or the dwellings need to be vacation or seasonal housings. But 5 counties in Idaho have met this criteria, and these are the recreational counties in Idaho: Bonner, Kootenai, Valley, Blaine, and Bear Lake. Many daily life patterns in Idaho are consistent with the rest of the nation. Idaho is actually more electronically connected than the nation as a whole, with almost 90% of its residents having access to internet. This is higher than the national average, which is about 86.5%. Idaho has fewer language barriers than the nation as a whole. The percentage of Idahoans who do not use English at home is half that of the national figure. About 90% of Idaho residents speak English at home, compared to 78% of the nation. Across the state as a whole, language barriers are less of an issue as compared to the nation. However, individual counties will tell a different story. 27% of Clark County residents, for instance, do not speak English at home. The rates of Spanish and other languages spoken at home is higher in southern Idaho counties. And remember, southern Idaho is the heavy agriculture and cattling part of Idaho. And so you're going to have a higher portion of international workers, Latino workers doing the agricultural work. So there's going to be more of a language barrier there than in other parts of the state. Idaho has the same percentage of senior citizens as the rest of the nation, with 16% of the population over the age of 65. So there are many people who have likely lived there for decades and decades. On the other hand, Idaho does have double the percentage of new residents to the state as compared to the standard rate in other states in the country. About 1 in 25 Idaho residents are new to the state in the past year. Think about that. If you go to a mall and walk past 50 people, 2 of those people are new to the state in this year. There are a few reasons why Idaho has so many new residents. A growing economy and a higher percentage of migrant agricultural workers might be reasons for a high proportion of new residents. The poverty rate in the state is slightly lower than the nation as a whole, 11.2% in Idaho, as compared to 12.3% in the nation. There really aren't patterns to poverty rates among Idaho's counties. We can see here that there are some northern counties with higher poverty rates, some central Idaho counties with higher poverty rates, and some southern Idaho counties with higher poverty rates. There is no simple eastern Idaho is poorer than western Idaho, or western Idaho is poorer than eastern Idaho, or northern Idaho is more impoverished than southern Idaho, or southern Idaho is more impoverished than northern Idaho. The poverty rates are really quite scattered across the state. And there really isn't sort of like a clustering of several counties together that here's where the poor in Idaho are. It's much more scattered than that. The one county to consider is Madison County, which has a very high poverty rate, 31%. So 1 in 3 people in Madison County meets the criteria that the United States government has set out to be considered impoverished. One figure that might surprise some people is the fact that Idahoans actually have shorter work commutes than the nation as a whole. The standard Idaho work commute is 21 and a half minutes compared to 27.6 minutes for the nation. This might at first seem quite surprising, as Idaho feels more spread out than other states with larger metropolitan areas. People in New York might live and work very close to where they live, and there's public transportation, and you think maybe it wouldn't take so long to get to work in a big city. However, there are a number of factors that could make Idaho result in shorter commutes. First, commutes will be, of course, shorter for those who live and work in the same small town. So you might have people in Idaho who only commute a few minutes to work. They live in a town of 2,000 people, and in the morning they get up, they get in their car, and 2 minutes they're at work, and that really brings down the average commute. However, even those who commute to a different city in Idaho to work will likely encounter less traffic than those who live and work in large cities. So it's easier to get from point A to point B in Idaho maybe than in New Jersey. Less traffic. The kicker though in Idaho is you need a car to realize those shorter commute times. And this of course is going to be a big issue for the blind. There are positives and negatives to these commute time figures. On the one hand, Idahoans can get to work faster than the national average because of less traffic. However, this assumes accessibility to a car. Large cities have more public transportation options. On the flip side, the accessibility issue in the big city with public transportation is that the vision impaired person would still need assistance getting to and from the stations and would need to navigate very dense crowds. Both big cities and small towns have commuting issues. They are just different issues. If one can get a ride, I know that this is a big if one can get a ride, if one has transportation, the commute time is actually on average much shorter in Idaho than it is across the country as a whole. A big factor in Idaho's topography is the Rocky Mountains, which makes transportation more complicated. There are only so many routes across those mountains. This may be a big reason why people will want to live and work in the same area, and it also makes it hard for VR offices to outreach to many communities. It can simply be hard to get to some places. There's only so many roads that get from point A to point B. But transportation is an issue in all states. Some states have long distances or mountains or limited public transit, like in Idaho, while the opposite situation can be found in large metropolitan eastern states. Huge crowds, difficult to navigate public transit stations, confusing and congested highways, and other issues. We will now look in detail at the counties with the highest economic risk in Idaho. This slide maps unemployment in Idaho by county. On the map, the denser the orange, the higher the unemployment, which you can see in the western half of the state, including Blaine County and center-south Idaho. The table lists the counties with the highest unemployment rates in 2020 and compares those figures with 2019, showing the percent change over the year. The coronavirus pandemic likely played a big role in the upswing of unemployment in some of these counties. Ironically, Madison County, with a very high poverty rate, actually has a very low unemployment rate. This is something to investigate. This is how demographics can actually be very complicated. So Madison County, very high poverty rate, highest in the state. Very low unemployment rate. What is going on there? Adams County has the highest unemployment rate of 9.3%, with Shoshone County following at 9.10%. Clearwater and Boise counties are at over 8% unemployment each. Blaine County jumped the highest in unemployment from 2019 to 2020, increasing from just 2.5% in 2019 to 7.8% in 2020, a change of 5.3%. Valley County also jumped from 3.7% to 7.9% between 2019 and 2020. Boise County's unemployment jumped almost 4% in that year as well. That map is helpful, showing West and North Idaho counties with deepest unemployment. Eastern Idaho has the lowest regional unemployment. So while we had looked at poverty rates across the state by county as a whole, and we hadn't really seen patterns, poverty was sort of scattered. Some counties in the north were poor, some counties in the center are poor, some counties in the south are poor. Unemployment does have more of a regional patterning. We can see unemployment more in northern counties and then low unemployment in eastern Idaho. So there's a little bit of a pattern there when we switch from poverty to employment. Veteran unemployment in Idaho is more spread out. Counties bordering Montana on the one side and several counties on the western boundaries with Oregon and Washington have high veteran unemployment. 1 in 5 Lincoln County veterans are unemployed, followed by Lewis County at 18%, Lemhi County at 15%, and Benewah County at 14% veteran unemployment. This slide shows poverty rates in Idaho by county. Again, the deeper the orange, the deeper the poverty. We can see Madison County, which we have already mentioned there in bright red, with a very high poverty rate at 31%. 1 in 3 residents in Madison County are classified as impoverished by the United States Census. I know I've said that again, but I wanted to restate it. Boundary, Shoshone, and Jerome counties have 19% poverty rates. Butte, Latah, and Custer counties are all at 18% poverty. Benewah, Bear Lake, Minidoka, and Gem counties are at 17% poverty. Camas, Gooding, Lewis, Owyhee, and Bannock counties are all at 16% poverty. Southeastern Idaho on the Wyoming border forms the one multi-county cluster of low poverty counties. So here we do have a pattern. You talked about how there isn't, the poverty rates across the state by county are quite scattered, but we do have a pattern in southeastern Idaho with low poverty. Teton has the lowest poverty rate at 4.5%, and Jefferson, Bonneville, Caribou, and Franklin are all under 11% poverty, better than the national average. Valley County also has low poverty at 7%. You can see that poverty is sometimes hard to pinpoint on a state, even at the county level. Madison County, the most impoverished county in Idaho, is surrounded by counties of much lower poverty rates. There are just many factors that go into poverty, and it can be difficult to pinpoint what the exact issue is. Something that is easier to identify in Idaho is counties with low employment. This is an easier number to identify than the many factors that go into poverty. So a county is designated as low employment if less than 65% of the residents aged 25 to 64 are employed. In this case, there is a tendency for low employment in northern Idaho. Lemhi, Idaho County, Clearwater, Shoshone, Bonner, and Boundary are all low employment counties. At least 35% of the population of working age in these counties is not in the workforce. So northern Idaho does have in a number, not all the counties in northern Idaho, but a number of them do have low employment. We will now switch gears from economics to human populations. We will take a look at Idaho's cultural diversity by county. Idaho has 25,621 Native American residents, or about 1% of the population. The percentage of Native Americans in Idaho at the state level is the same as the nation as a whole, but we will see that this changes when we look at individual counties. The map on this slide shows Native American population by county. The deeper the blue, the more Native American residents in that county. Bingham County has 3,340 Native Americans, which means 7% of that county is Native American. Nez Perce County also has a high percentage of Native Americans at 6%. While this might seem like a low figure, remember this is 6 times the national rate. Bannock County is 4% Native American. A county with many people like Ada County has a very low percentage of Native Americans, but lower population counties like Bingham and Nez Perce have a much higher proportion of Native Americans. Idaho has a significant Hispanic and Latino community. Almost 250,000 residents of Idaho are Hispanic or Latino. This is 13% of the population, or about 1 in 6 Idahoans belonging to this community. 1 in 10 households in Idaho do not use English at home, and Spanish is the lion's share of this subgroup. About 1 in 12 Idahoans use Spanish at home. This is not an insignificant amount of people. The map on this slide illustrates the counties with the highest number of Hispanic and Latino population. The deeper the blue, the greater the number of Hispanic or Latino people in the county. Canyon County has the greatest population of Hispanic and Latino people with almost 60,000 residents, which account for over 1/4 of the population of Canyon County. The next most populous Hispanic or Latino county is Ada County at over 45,000 individuals. Bonneville and Twin Falls counties are the home to over 15,000 Hispanic or Latino residents each. Jerome County has the highest proportion of Hispanic or Latino people at 38%, meaning that about 2 in 5 people in Jerome County are Hispanic or Latino. Twin Falls and Bingham counties both have 17% of their population belonging to the Hispanic or Latino communities. This next slide presents information that is surprising to many people. It is not a new thing that large portions of American agricultural work is done by international migrant workers. This has been well known by the United States government since at least the middle of the 20th century. 28% of Clark County's residents were born in Mexico, meaning that almost 1 in 3 people in that county are international workers. 15% of Power County's residents were born in Mexico. Lincoln and Minidoka counties both consist of a population where 14% of the population was born in Mexico. Jerome, Gooding, and Blaine are all over 10% population born in Mexico. This is all important because VR outreach to these Hispanic, Latino, and migrant communities would need to accommodate a Spanish-speaking population that in many ways would have also different social norms. And this is also going to be true with those counties that we discussed as Native American. There may be different social norms. We will now go into the demographics of disability. 13.7% of Idaho's population is disabled. This means about 1 in 6 Idahoans are disabled. 2.3% have vision difficulty, or about 1 in 50. This is actually a significant number. Think of a movie theater with 50 people. Somebody in that room, statistically, has a vision difficulty that qualifies as a disability. About 1 in 20 Idahoans have difficulty with independent living. Idaho has a higher rate of employment for disability than the national rate. 30% of disabled Idahoans are employed versus 25% at the national level. This is great news, and it means that employers in Idaho may be more open to hiring a disabled worker than in other states. An important cultural note about Idaho is that Native Americans in Idaho have the highest proportion of their populations with disabilities. 1 in 5 Native Americans in Idaho qualifies as disabled, as compared to 14% of the population as a whole in Idaho. At the national level, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has spliced out the differences in employment between people with disabilities and people without disabilities. This graph shows the gaps in employment between people without a disability in red with those with a disability in blue. The table on the left lists the age groups by the difference in employment. The biggest gap in employment between those without disabilities and disabled populations is later career. in the bracket between workers who are 45 to 54 years old, where there is an astonishing 50% difference in employment between people who have a disability and those that don't. The most senior workers, 55 to 64, exhibit a 44% difference in employment between people who are disabled and those who are not disabled. The youngest workers, 16 to 19, show the lowest gap in employment difference. So the distinction between Idahoans with disability who are employed becomes greater as their career progresses. So what this data shows us is that teenage workers and workers in their 20s, there isn't that much of a difference between those that are disabled and those that are not disabled in terms of employment, but that the gap there will widen as the career progresses. In Idaho, the disabled and those without disabilities work in the same sectors, basically in the same proportion. 2/3 of both populations work as employees of private companies. About the same number of disabled Idahoans are self-employed as those without disabilities. There is a distinction, however, in the proportion of self-employed workers who have actually incorporated their business. 3% of disabled workers are self-employed at an incorporated business, but the percentage of workers without disabilities who are self-employed in incorporated businesses is almost double at 5%. A potential avenue for VR in Idaho might be in assisting self-employed workers in the process of incorporation. The percentage of disabled workers and those not disabled working for the federal government and the state government is the same in Idaho. So the government, of course, has very strict rules about not discriminating against people because of disability. And so that is an avenue, and Idaho does have a significant amount of public land, and in several counties, as we've seen, these public sector jobs are very dominant in the economy. We have examined a wide breadth of data. I know it's a lot of numbers, but hopefully these are illuminating. We have seen how Idaho is a rapidly growing state. Southern Idaho is heavily agricultural. And this region also has a lower educational attainment, as well as a higher proportion of Mexican-born residents, and Hispanic and Latino populations are higher here too. We have seen that poverty is somewhat scattered across the state without a simple east-west or north-south pattern. But southeastern Idaho has a very low poverty rate as well as a high household income. Northern Idaho has several counties with low unemployment. Madison County is the poorest county in the state. Idaho has a number of counties with a high proportion of veterans, and Idaho is also a state in which the governmental sector is an important employer, and there may be opportunities for unemployed veterans to enter government positions. Economies are changing everywhere. There are new opportunities, including remote work, internet business, self-employment, and other options in our changing landscape. So just to sort of recap some of the graphical information so that it sort of seeps in a little bit more. I know that there is a lot of numbers and it kind of jumbles together. We have on this map the orange counties showing the population centers. And this is really quite consistent with many states in the United States, where you have a few population centers and then a lot of open rural area in between. So Idaho, in some senses, really isn't a whole lot different than, say, a state like Pennsylvania or Michigan or Texas, where you have a few population centers, major population centers, and then a lot of rural in between. Median household income, we can see that the southeast quarter has pretty high median household income. On this map, there's a lot of orange in the center, and those are counties that are dominated by federal and state government economies, lots of jobs in federal and state agencies. And then in the South, in deep blue, we have farming counties, counties that are dominated by a farm economy. In purple, we have our recreation centers. So way up in the north, in the center, and then in the southeast, there's a lot of hospitality, vacationing, restaurants in those counties. And then right in the center and up north, we do have some mining, which was probably the original reason why a lot of the settlers came out there in the first place. And we do have one county in the southeast with manufacturing dependent economy. Unemployment rates, we do see patterning here. The east and southeast Idaho has much lower unemployment rates than northern Idaho. So western and northern Idaho along the Washington border there, and then the Montana border in the north, those are where you're going to have higher unemployment rates. The southeast has a little bit less issues with employment. Poverty rates, remember, are going to be much more scattered. Those are sort of harder to see with county demographics. Now you'll notice in the southeast it does match up with some of the other information that we've seen. The southeast portion of the state having higher employment and higher median household income, so that you do see that a little bit there in the southeast with those clustering of very light yellow counties that do have very low poverty rates. But the rest of the state, you can see poverty is sort of scattered across the state. That was a lot of numbers. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you so much for your time.